I'm Kate Ely, Umatilla Basin Hydrologist in the Department of Natural Resources, Water Resources Program. And sorry, folks online, but I will be talking near the computer and advancing the slides, so you'll just hear me. So, and this is a team approach presentation, myself, and then followed up with Marty King, Water Quality Coordinator. David Hare, our Water Resources Program Manager, was going to start the day, but he has jury duty. So
Yeah, right.
yeah. So I'm filling in for him, and I'm sorry, but there won't be much variety in this presentation. It will be just me.
Yeah, give it a minute.
I might have advanced 4 times already.
Yep.
What's the correct pronunciation of Cuus?
Shush, water, shush.
Yeah.
I've got this memorized, so. Sort of. That's okay. There goes. Okay, thank you. Okay, today's presentation we'll have introductions, and we'll introduce the Department of Natural Resources mission, the Water Resources Program goals and function, and management tools, and water cycle human effects. That's when I'm supposed to start. Surface water and groundwater connection, drought mitigation strategy, and climate action plan implementation. So the first, I'm talking about your brothers and sisters, right? First foods, and most of you know about the first foods, but I'll introduce them anyway. Cuus, Yamas, Ouch. Didn't we? We would. Thank you. Water, salmon, deer, ouch, and huckle. And first foods begin with the creation story and coming of people. In anticipation of their arrival, they held a council and offered themselves to help the people when they arrived. And the first to offer themselves was the salmon. And this is also the serving order in the traditional longhouse and ceremonial events. So covenant was formed between the first foods, and in reciprocity, they would take care of each other and protect each other. That's really important for all time, for all stake. And so it makes sense that the Department of Natural Resources would develop a mission around the first foods. So the Department of Natural Resources mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the first foods: water, salmon, deer, Cuus, and huckleberry, for the perpetual cultural, economic, and sovereign benefit of the CTUIR. And we will accomplish this utilizing traditional ecological and cultural knowledge and science to inform the population and habitat and management goals and actions, and natural resources policy and regulatory mechanisms. And the Water Resources Program has and policies and means to help support the first foods in all of them. Okay, so Water Resources Program goals are to ensure clean and adequate water to produce foods, ensure water supplies for economic development of the reservation, and manage tribal water resources for sustainable use, long-term use in the changing climate, and that's why we have the climate adaptation plan. Okay, our organization is, again, David Hare is our program manager, and we have Lloyd Barkley, who's in the hall with the water quality equipment. He's the water quality technician. Marty King, water quality coordinator. Myself, Dana Sheedy, I hear she's here. The Rotunda water resources technician. Kelly Warren, our water code administrator and water resources specialist. And then 2 new hires, which we're really happy to have, Jerry Wolf, water resources technician, and Lindsay Lewis, also water resources. We fulfill the obligations of the water resources program. Okay, so our objectives are to protect and manage tribal water resources. We implement the tribal water code, rules and regulations, standards. Look, we have lots of things to follow here. Water quality standards, and we have a water resources plan of operations in which we characterize all water resources of tribal interest, and on reservation and off reservation, and protect tribal sovereignty, tribal water rights, treaty rights, and the like. We also maintain an early warning system at Indian Lake Dam. So the water code was developed in 1981, and it is a code that is enforceable. We can have police action if a violation takes place in the water code. Let's see, that is what's unique about the water code. Chris Kowitz was here a minute ago, but we have tribal water permits. That's really important. We don't have tribal water rights for people who develop water. They're permitted to use tribal resources, not a right to. And we also permit domestic uses as well. That's unlike Oregon water resources. We have a unique code. We have 18 beneficial uses that have been identified, whereas like the state has 12 beneficial uses. We have rules and standards for development and use and allowance of water. The state allows 3 acre-foot up to 6 acre-feet per acre for irrigation use. We allow 1 acre-foot per acre. We conserve water. And so we also regulate water quality to ensure that water bodies meet the water quality standards, which are in that volume. I'm not going to read all this, but there's one top paragraph I will. Water is one of our most sacred gifts from the Creator and an essential part of our religion. Water is the lifeblood in the veins of the Pacific Northwest. Without good, clean, flowing water, nothing will survive. In-stream flows and good water must be restored. And this led in the state and Environmental Protection Agency recognized the need for good quality water to support fisheries and to support other beneficial uses. The tribes then developed the total maximum daily load. You heard TMDL earlier, but it's an unfortunate choice of words because it is so important to the concept to protect and restore water for life. And the total maximum daily load, we're going to hear more about it from Marty. But basically it's setting a goal. Let's see, I didn't bring our TMDL.
We have some out in the hallway.
Okay, so it's out in the hallway, so you can look to see what is involved in a TMDL plan. But it's really the first goal establishing step to have a water quality cleanup plan. And temperature and sediment are the 2 primary pollutants that we monitor pretty extensively throughout the basin in Walla Walla and other areas. Because if you can control the stream temperature and the heat that kills fish, you're also you can correct for other pollutants like dissolved oxygen or lack thereof. Fish need oxygen too. So the warmer the water, the less the oxygen. So we treat temperature, we're also treating dissolved oxygen. That's what I mean by a surrogate. And you treat sediment, you monitor for sediment you're also going to be correcting for pollutants that's carried by sediment, like and bacteria and algae and turbidity, which is a problem for fish and others. So he'll more.
So we've got a whole presentation about it. Great.
So finding documents for us, which is really cool documents, is Conduit law. Everything is connected. Well, we have a river vision that connects many aspects of a river. We have the aquatic biota, riparian vegetation, geomorphology, hydrology, which includes water quality and water quantity, and all being connected. So this is a guiding document for us to help restore the first foods in a riverine type environment. And then following this is the first foods upland vision, which, the upland, rangeland. And I have forgotten the touchstones. Touchstones are soil stability, hydrologic function, landscape pattern, and biotic integrity. Now, the hydrology component we're involved with like spring sites and the like. And the landscape pattern, biointegrity, that's the other department or program involvement. But these documents, they present a natural perspective that links and connects biology, physical form, time, and the landscape. A very holistic approach. And with that, we'll be protecting, restoring, enhancing first foods. Okay, so that was the end of Dave's presentation. So, you want a break?
Go for it.
Somebody else should be talking now, because I know how tough it is. I've sat in these things.
We're excited to learn this.
Okay, I'm excited to share this because I love the work that we're about to do for climate adaptation. All right, so I'm going to introduce the water and water cycle, surface water and groundwater connection, human effects on the water cycle. There are two posters in the hallway that really display the natural water cycle and the human impact water cycle. So I encourage you to explore those posters. Drought mitigation strategy, that's a new grant we have and project, and then climate adaptation plan implementation. Okay, here is spaceship grandmother Earth. Points out. And there's only so much water on the planet. 70% is water, 30% land. Only so much water. This is during the eclipse in 2008. Okay, so the distribution of water on spaceship grandmother Earth, 90%, 97% of the water is in ocean, saline state. Only 3% is fresh water, all the water of the world. Of that 3%, most of it, 69, is tied up in glaciers and ice. Groundwater is 30%, and the other accessible fresh water is only 1%. Mind you, that's 1% of 3%. Okay, is actually fresh water. So now if we take a look at what fresh water is, fresh water, we have 52, half of it is in lakes. 1% is in organisms. 1%, only 1% is in a river. Then there's nearly 1% in water vapor and clouds. And then soil moisture is 38%. So get down to what the river, the amount of water, 1% of 1% of 3%, very little. So yeah, our water cycle. We just talked about where it all stepwise is. 30% again. Oh, okay, let's start with the oceans, right? 97% ocean. And it evaporates into the atmosphere, forming clouds, which then releases water for rain and snow. And then we come down to a runoff situation, and it also runs off into the groundwater system. Remember, 30% of that 1% is groundwater. Only 1% of it's in a surface runoff. Okay, so this is the natural, and you can see that. So in 2010, we did our own little hydrologic cycle assessment. This is a publication that we presented folks. It's a USGS report. USGS report 2017, but the water data we collected and analyzed is for 2010, and we estimated how much evaporation, evapotranspiration, precipitation, how much groundwater pumping there is from domestic, municipal, irrigation, and commercial use, how much runs off into the streams, and how much groundwater discharge to the streams, and how much recharge to the groundwater system. And so we have our own little water budget and water cycle going on here. And this is a cartoon to show how people have managed water and maneuvered the water cycle to fit their needs. We have water now being diverted from the river system to irrigate and for stock watering for cities and for mostly irrigation, actually. So I used to say water flows to money now, where we want to put it to beneficial use. Right. So what is groundwater? And this is not a new word for you all, but I want to be sure that you understand what it is. When I refer to groundwater, I'm talking about water beneath the water table. And water occurs in groundwater between the pore spaces of rock grains. This is an illustration of water entering into the pore space of rock. And so I had a cup of water in a 12-ounce jar, and it's still not full. I could have filled this a lot. So there's a lot of storage space between the rock grains that is groundwater. Now the top of where the water line is what we call the water table. And beneath the water table, everything is saturated. Every pore space is saturated. So that's groundwater, water table. That's okay. Okay. So now, now it's stored, and there's lots of storage here, but can it move through the rock grains? And like clays and silts doesn't move, right? That water, it's hard, and concrete. It's hard to move water, but you can store water in it. But now these pebbles show that it releases water readily. So if the rock formation is large enough size and permeable to support the well, we call it an aquifer. That's the difference between a groundwater and an aquifer. Aquifer produce water to wells. Okay, and so there has to be storage and permeability. Groundwater was little used, a century ago, and 1950s, 1930s, started developing groundwater and started putting to use, and that disrupts the water cycle. And we have yet to, describe what's all going on with the water cycle and how disruptive it is and how it interacts and changes stream flow patterns too. We're exploring that, and with development, like in the lower Umatilla Basin, groundwater levels are declining. They're being overdrafted. They're being mined, not on reservation. And for the most part, groundwater is invisible, but we see it in seeps and springs. So imagine where does, there's groundwater discharge to that spring, Almond Spring. And then where the trees are lined up, there's groundwater discharge points where those trees are. When you have vegetation and you have soil development with the vegetation and the organic matter and the recycling, you're building up soil, which like your composting concept, you're also developing storage space for water. And that would be a perched groundwater. But in here it's seeping from the basalts. So that's how you can have springs and development trees.
Question about that. The wetlands park, is that a source of ours? Is that a drinking source of ours?
What?
Wetlands park.
It's a groundwater discharge area.
It
Yeah, it's a groundwater discharge pond wetland area.
Okay.
And the Spring Creek that runs around Confederate Way, that's a discharge point too. When the groundwaters are really high, I actually saw this and put a video of the Spring Creek and the discharge coming from the Walla Walla Creek or Walla Walla Court to the creek. It's, and then
Right.
there's a point coming up, bubbling up and going out. So
Right.
it's like totally cool.
We are working with planning department, talking about what we done to sort of alleviate the flooding problem down along Spring Creek and the housing area down there.
And that's the flooding that comes up from the water tower. I noticed along the road, there's some kind of flooding that goes on right there.
It's groundwater discharge.
That's what that is?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There isn't a leak. So springs and seeps, those are areas we see groundwater. We see it in cisterns and boreholes. This is Moonshine Cistern. We age dated the groundwater seeping out of here to be 10,000 years old. And that would be like the water table in a well, the borehole picture there. We see it in rivers and creeks. And next slide will show that. So this time of year, we don't have rain. There's some snow melt, but that's not enough to support the water we have in the river. What we see in the river now is base flow. Even though it's not summertime, that is base flow, groundwater supported in stream flow. It's really important to recognize that groundwater and surface water are connected. They support each other. And the next slide, we'll see how rivers and streams might influence groundwater. So this is a illustration of groundwater surface water connection. And it's a cross section on the Pendleton River Parkway. See where the water table is? Water table, oh, it's not showing up here.
Here, I'll be your Vanna.
What, you can, on both sides, it's on both sides, the water table. Everything beneath it is saturated. We have layered basalt like we have in the hillside. You've seen all that basalt, right? Basalt rock layered. Well, we get our aquifers, our water yielding rock formations in the interflow zone, that line. That has storage and broken rock and permeability to support a well. Not the dense basalt flow, you know how hard rock that is. And so there isn't an aquifer in the basalt interior, but there is in the interflow zone. And those are thin and few and far between. The one interflow zone intercepts the gravels, up, intercepts the gravels. That's where we might have basalt gravel interaction. And then the slope of the water table says the river is supporting groundwater. River, it's going out into the floodplain. All right, so here's our human effect on the water cycle. People in the floodplain, there's mining going on. Where there should be. And there's groundwater recharge and evaporation, but yeah. And so with human effects, we have runoff from roads, from gravel roads, dirt roads, and wastewater. We have it running off into the creek, into the rivers and lakes. And with climate change, we're going to be we're going to be increasing rainfall, like I'm on the right side here. Increasing rainfall and then and added heat, with the added heat and less snow. And then with more heat, we're going to have more evaporation and it's going to come and go into the atmosphere. Water is also a greenhouse gas. Not only with the people and the roads and the carbon dioxide that's emitted from the factories and the like, we're also increasing water greenhouse gas.
Which is why we're seeing the heavy precipitation.
Heavy precipitation, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there we go. So our added heat and effects from climate change will have drought. We'll have increases in flooding and increases in drought severity and length. And people in first foods suffer from drought. And we may also have groundwater level declines, which affect our drinking water supplies and the amount of interaction with creeks and rivers. So to build tribal drought resilience, this is the part I'm really excited, and I hope my voice can change to excite you into what we're about to do in the next 2 years. We're going to develop a drought early warning system and expand our monitoring to the uplands and to groundwater levels in the South Reservation and develop a water conservation plan. Comes from a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. We've heard NOAA a lot, but a new acronym for many people. And the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS. And really wonderful. So the drought early warning system, we're going to look at an example, but it's a tribally, culturally relevant approach to report on drought conditions. We'll have a dashboard and a website to go to that you can look at weather and look at first food situation, look at how things are looking in the local, regional, national arena. And we'll do this with partnerships. OWRD is not here, but we'll be partnering with them, and Oregon State University, who is here. Thank you. And Ag Research Service, which is North Reservation, and others, many, many other people will be partnering. National Weather Service, of course. So, and we'll be sharing this information and the plan, like I mentioned. All right, this is an example dashboard. This is so cool. Dave Robertson from ARS developed this dashboard, and this website's no longer available. And fortunately for us, and he's given our permission, we can copy stuff from what he's already developed. But it's a great visual display of how to get to weather and how to get to drought and how to get to information. Like at the bottom, you can't see, he has weather like Pendleton Weather Station, air quality, weather nerds, lightning maps, things that you might be interested in, drought, is there lightning or thunderstorms, what's going on. You can go to this new drought early warning system dashboard and find all the information you need.
One-stop shopping.
One-stop shopping. It's going to be great. Really looking forward to it. And then, the culturally relevant part, which is unique to our dashboard, we'll have selections to look at water, like what are the in-stream flows like? What's the groundwater levels like? What's the fish runs? What are the populations? You'll be able to go online and look at first foods and see how they're faring, this year, last year, whatever historic records we have available. We'll have graphs, charts, information, drought reports, so you'll be able to come on to our dashboard and get information. So I've already mentioned this, but the other part is natural hazard planning and preparedness. something we'll need to plan for, and the dashboard will have some sort of a connection to that. And we'll have research, we'll have partnerships. You know, so much of our work, we cannot do without partners and teamwork. And so I'm just really thankful that we have that established. Many agencies. Okay, so the water resources. Climate adaptation plan is a great document because what it does
Every time.
is it integrates, it's an interdepartmental document and that's the Tamama thing. Things are connected, right? And so we all should be planning for the future under any condition. And this is what's so terrific is that it's integrated, it's many departments. And what the water resources will do is try to do as much as we can to manage and plan for the future. And so we'll continue to do the work and we'll continue to implement River Vision. If we are, focus on implementing these strategies, we are adapting. We are able to adapt and manage for the resources. So what's next? People, you need to reduce greenhouse gases and use less fossil fuels, walk, skip, bike, do something different than your cars, take the bus. And most of all, conservation in all aspects of your life. Reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose. Part of the drought early warning system grant was to develop a conservation plan for the tribes. And that will have triggers and strategies and, guidance to what to do during different forms of drought. So we will have conservation planning. That's pretty much in the end. Yucca Springs, Meacham drainage. We've done a lot of spring surveys, inventory in the last 10 years. It's just been an amazing experience. In the whole, there's over 100 photograph slides of pictures from our field adventures and our monitoring. So if you want to take a look, it's a running program there. Things like this, just fabulous. Great, it's a fun job.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, okay. Any questions?
I was wondering about the conservation plan kind of timeline. Are here pretty soon? Are you looking at talking with stakeholders? What's the next step that you're looking to do?
Well, the conservation plan, I don't know that we'll be working with stakeholders at this time, but I'll be preparing a request for proposals and have a pretty well-described script to address and conservation for the first foods, and we'll present it before the commissions and the board and get something adopted. So, and then, it'll be something that's evolving. Voluntary at first, I envision. But because we have the water code and because we have a judicial system where we can enforce measures, if voluntary conservation is inadequate, we can actually enforce laws and conservation.
That's, I think, when we talk about air quality, enforcement is one of those things tricky. So it's good to hear that there is an enforcement mechanism for water quality.
Yeah,
It's great to get something for air quality.
it's water conservation. Yes. Yeah.
So because of that, there will be a wildland fire component on your dashboard? Or
Well, yeah,
in the- in
that
that-
dashboard will have a public outreach on that too, and what to put on the dashboard and what information they'll want to see. Yeah, it's wildfire, definitely. First foods. Why not?
I just had a question when you start looking at the springs, how they flow through. I know we used to go to what we call elk camp. We go long ways. in the mountains and put like 6 camps up. And the ladies would work with the meat. They'd go hunting and bring the meat in. We'd all be sitting care of the meat, drying it. And there were several women, and they don't do that anymore. And it's just something that maybe it'll come back. But I remember the springs, they were so pretty. And we'd have to get buckets and go get water and bring it to the camp. And are you working to locate some of those old springs and what took place there?
Yeah.
It would be really nice to document while we still can where the people went, what they did there, how they took care of the area. Did they leave it the same when they arrived? When they left, was it looking the same? That was important because as children, we had to be the cleanup crew, always going picking things up we brought in, we took home. So I said, so next year when we come, we'll be able to have fun here again. But long time since I've been up that way. But I think it would really be nice if we could document those places and check those springs out, see if they're still flowing.
Yeah. We started a spring inventory in our program in 2009 in compiling what's on record for state and federal agencies. And then adding to that data set the last 10 years. And in 2017 and 18, we really went to town, did a lot of spring inventory. You know, and then we collected water quality samples, in sites. And we measure annually 10 sites across the reservation. And that's 2009. We will, with this drought early warning system grant, we'll expand our spring monitoring to the upper watershed and tie it in with drought response. The springs are windows to groundwater. They, you know, if groundwater is not being recharged, the first thing to come to show is the spring site. So, you know, it's really important we keep close tabs on them. I would love to hear you see and map spring sites you're familiar with, so we can complete our inventory and have stories behind the spring with your memory of them. We take photographs when we monitor every year, so we can see the changes over time.
Like you're talking about the Cuus, it was so important. These while we'd be heading to the mountains, helping with the camps, and then just before that, we'd be going up to the big rivers. The young men would be getting their first salmon. My ropes on them, their salmon, and hang on. But they did the same thing there, put camps up, took care of the salmon, canned it or fried it. And they would come home all prepared for the winter. And the families that took part, they'd take their share and they'd be ready. But there was a lot of work to following the first foods. And that was something I was really grateful. Grandmas. Without them, I wouldn't have these memories. Remember what we did and why we did it. And I know there were other families did the same thing, just not in the same area. Everybody had locations that they went. I just think for history, I think it would be critical for us to try to document where those happened and what families took part. When they were teaching the children, I was a child then, and And I had to learn how to do things. I feel really bad because I didn't take my grandchildren to their places and work with them here in the fish, salmon. But one of the most fun things we did was when we had the Indian Lake. We did that. We brought the elders up there. They would work with the kids and show them how to work with their foods. I think that's one way we can look at preserving what we used to have, just in a different manner. Bringing people to show their knowledge and share with the children, so they have a history now, and they'll tell their children about what they learned. Maybe continue, pass it on. I just would not like to see that die.
Yeah.
I really feel bad because we don't go to elk camp anymore. We don't go up and get the salmon like we used to. See the camps go up.
Is it elk camp accessible by car? I see a trip ahead of us.
But it was exciting because there were a lot of grandchildren, so we all would get together. But sometimes we wouldn't see each other for a year or so. But we look forward to that and get to do that. Those stories, if you can find them out there, get maybe put maps together and share that. Preserve it. It's not many of us can remember all that. Thankful I can remember and help me in where we go and the areas we were looking at. Wish I'd have paid more attention to my grandfather and my dad because they'd always take us and tell us the same story. But being kids, you know, you run around and play and don't want to work. But they put up with us. And we'd stay up there all summer on until roundup, then we'd come down. And then my grandfather, he'd get stubborn and he wouldn't come down till the first snow. But then we'd be tearing tents down in the snow. So
I'd want to come back from that.
That's all Lisa.
I think to echo what Elvina said, it is decolonizing water. Some of the things that we say we're timid in being bold enough to say that it's been colonized. And that framework that the stories are not in the foreground, they should be in the forefront. So I'm like Elvina, you know, my parents were in the 20s and 30s, and I was listening to these stories, not realizing. So we don't think we're making history when we're talking to our elders. We really do not realize that how vital those conversations are with having to understand why they're telling us those things until we look decades ahead and realize that there was a purpose for it. But what I always say as a water commission member, that there's got to be, you've got to start from the people and grow up. Because if we don't have conversations with the people who are not technical or not SMEs, don't understand the level of, you know, we need to hear their input about what their value of water is, because we're in a position where individuals may not feel like they are a part of the solution. And I think that they're being left out of the conversations of understanding that we're all, as a definition of a tribe, everybody's affected. I think the thing that hits me the most is I don't hear conversations with my 20 4-year-old, my 21-year-old, my 12-year-old, my 14-year-old in school. I mean, I think that we are very privileged, and I think we are really taking things for granted. And when DRC talks about composting, it's discipline to compost. You get criticized to compost, you know, to add in the worms, like you're crazy, like you're wasteful. In conservation, it's almost like the habitual way that we have is always consumption. You know, I tell my kids, like, do you realize, you know, that we're a part of the problem? And my son kind of always have to do compost. I'm like, well, ever since I kind of got engaged with it, you know, I tell him his chore is grow, garbage, recycle, organic matter, and water. That's your chore. And I'm cornball. I love acronyms because it's easy to remember, but I instill that in him, and hopefully, you know, it echoes with him doing a chore. I mean, I incentivize it, definitely. Tell my kids, you know, I finally broke down and got them phones. That's how you pay your phone bill, is you go to do that compost. That's your currency right here. You may not see the money, but when I pay for a privilege that you have, and I said, if you don't like it, I don't ground you, I ground your phone. I'll put it on my bed. If you don't want to do that chore, I'll go ahead and send it out to the compost. But I think there are non-governmental groups and societies that we are afraid to build here. Not all of us, but the organization of it, with reaching the outreach that we've talked about, is always just very governmental outreach. It's not communal outreach. So the framework has to be what happens on the nights, the days after 4, and the weekends. You know, where we're beginning to resolve the things that we are still carrying from our ancestors, or still carrying intergenerational trauma. Because if you were raised in impoverished and you get some money, I've heard people say, I have it, so I'm gonna take it. Because that's that breaking the cycle of being impoverished. I had a friend that said, I waste toilet paper because I can. Because I didn't have it. I was getting napkins from fast food places. That's real true life. Even today, we've got people, there's the inequity from people that it frustrates me as a member of the regulatory body for water, of not really understanding how we can all individually be like that ripple effect. And I think we just need to keep talking and keep producing conversations like this for that ripple that's going to send it out. You know, my kids are going to hear about this tonight. I want that continuation. I was going to make a comment about place names with the recharge areas. I wish we did more signage. I know people destroy them, but I wish we had some kind of placards of place names and areas that, you know, I have an intermittent stream, but not everybody knows where Moonshine and Cottonwood are. I tell my kids, you got to know your roads, you got to know your areas. You know, we were out there looking for our dogs. I said, we're right past Moonshine. Where's Moonshine? And I know it's my personal responsibility to teach my kids, but there's a lot of people, that even adults, that don't know their landmarks. You know? And those are great opportunities for education.
For folks who are interested in going out into the field with water resources staff, you know, that opportunity is there. You know, contact us, let us know that you're interested, and we'll have your name. And when we go out, you can tag along, you can be a part. I tell you, we tried to get as many people on that spring inventory project. And then there was a tributary project where all we had to do is go around all these little creeks and ravines, and flowing or not flowing. But what a great project. You know, not too hard. Observations, flowing or not, and then plot them on a map. And it's called Intermittent Stream Project. And by doing this kind of survey, and then in the future redoing that survey, we'll see how the stream systems are responding. We can't measure everything all the time, but we can go out there, you know, every 5 years and see how things are doing. But you know, I guess this is me now saying to folks, come to Water Resources, talk to us, and we'll schedule a time to come out and be in the field with us.
Intern, opportunity?
Yeah, we've had several interns.
How does that work? I just started school for agricultural production, so I'm.
Well, so in the pictures out there, you'll see Wiley Red Crane. He was there for our spring inventory. I mean, it was just a great project. Interns, we had interns for the initial spring inventory, just amassing all the data and documenting, adding what we know about springs and putting it together. And yeah, we did a water level measurement in wells across the reservation, 200 wells at a time. We had an intern to help us then and do a groundwater study, a water table map per se. But groundwater levels we measure. Topographic map, you can map.
A cool composting fact I would like to share is if you can compost your household's waste at home, you can offset your power at home by 75% or the usage of your car. I know there's not very many education places to reference that kind of stuff or and community engagement, but I plan on doing a lot of education with my community when it comes to composting.
At my home, I use my compost for water recapture, basically. So when I'm getting my water hot to do my dishes, I run it into a bucket and I take that bucket out and put it on my compost pile. And that way I'm saving money because the city charges you for the water that goes down the drain as well as the water that comes out of the tap. So I'm saving myself some money in my sewer, but then I'm also saving that water. And then the compost, it needs that water. And so you're having like a trifold benefit. Right. And so compost and water conservation is an excellent combination.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
So the conservation plan request for proposals will be coming out this year, and then we'll get something back next year. And that's when the stories of how we can conserve will really come together. And composting and reuse and saving will all.
One of the areas that you might look at working with is the cultural community.
Oh, yeah.
Because they took elders that told the stories that one of them I told. They showed the people, this is what happened here, the trading took place, other tribes came, we would trade our goods. Then you go to another area and then we trade with the tribes along the coast and get our baskets and whatever, but I know they would be familiar with a lot of the stories that they document. I think if you went through the documentation, you could pinpoint. They're talking about elk camp. There's streams up there. Talking about going down the river for salmon. They'll tell you the locations in those documents. Because they took those people out, showed them, this is what happened here. So many places that they talked about can't be documented because you can't get in there anymore. Fences have gone up. I know my grandmother, she was just a little girl and she said, it was this scary, but we did it. They went horseback and they rode along a cliff and I bet just barely wide enough for horses, single horses to go along there. They came into this beautiful meadow. And there were springs there. It was beautiful. They never wanted to forget it. So her dad decided to name my grandmother give her that name so they would never forget that place. But she said, you can't get there anymore. It's in your mind, but it's gone. So that's the name that my daughter had. I would have loved to gone to see that. Tribes met, gathered together. But those, I think that committee will really help you, just going through documents, what their stories were, finding those places. I think it would really be helpful, but it's gonna take someone to go and look at all the documents and go through them. But it'll familiarize you with what they're talking
Taking notes.
about.
I think my question was answered. I was gonna ask, would the conservation plan be done before you actually retire? But it sounds like you're gonna put an RFP out to get, yeah. And so what are you in month whatever of that grant right now?
We're months into it. And it hasn't fully kicked off. So this is the soft open.
She's not leaving till.
I know.
I mean, excited about it. Yeah, I didn't. Next time. I have, we're drilling 2 new wells as well in the South Reservation area. The Horse Arena site, and that's to monitor the deep groundwater and the upper groundwater aquifers. We have sparse data in the South Reservation, and it's a growing area. It's being developed, and so we want to keep tabs on water levels there. So with our other 14 wells that we monitor across the reservation, we'll have a pretty good handle on the state of groundwater during times of use. We'll have a good handle.
I just want to thank Elvina too for commenting and providing us some good information from our past, you know. And then I don't know if maybe in that place names atlas, maybe it's what you were talking about, maybe it was identified. Get you a copy.
Oh, I've enjoyed this time. Make me remember too many things.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful to see what we started in the beginning to where we are now. We've taken great leaps forward.
Somebody else have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious if there's been a conversation started with tribal farming enterprise about mechanisms to increase water holding capacity.
Not with me. I did have a telephone call with Kevin Hudson.
Okay.
When we were putting together the drought early warning system proposal and, factors affecting farming. And Kevin practically says, we plan that we're not going to be in a drought. We plan we're going to have a normal year, and that's the way we will, be farming. So, think positive. I think, there's more to talk about.
Stephen, I'm curious to know your thoughts on drought, because you work with the OSU research station with agricultural producers. So what are you doing in your research that maybe plugs into this drought conversation?
It puts some of that evidence. It's like, changing our farming practices from the normal tilling of the land, which, encourages erosion to, no-till. And I think some of your data shows that with no-till, we've increased our water holding infiltration, and some of the wells are getting more water because of what's happening up. And I think we're going towards that, covering the ground most of the time, and not tilling the soil.
I also think that farming might need to think about how do you work with the land rather than at the land. I know that there are anecdotal evidence of people who have worked with floodplain restoration efforts that have been able to plant alfalfa and have a sub-irrigated crop that they're not having to apply irrigation water to, because it is able to reach the groundwater much better than it was when it was channelized. That water was just rushing through past that farm. So this is a conversation with ag that how can we produce food better with our land rather than on our land? So we're at 4:15, so our next talk is projected to start at 4:30. So I think maybe going out to see some of those photos that you were talking about, Kate. Do you want to maybe talk through some of the photos out in the rotunda?
The posters? Oh, the photos.
Yeah, the photos that are or whatever's happening out there. We'll come back at 4:30 if you guys are still here. I appreciate you staying with us. We are trying to do what Andrea recommended, which is the try and hit people when they're not at work. So this is kind of our first effort at doing that. So we appreciate you being here very, very much.
We also have examples of equipment that we're currently using or have used for groundwater and surface water measurements and monitoring. If anybody's interested in it.